Hello and good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again. I've mentioned this in other videos before in the past, but I think there are undoubtedly 2 or 3 points in the Bond film series history where, if the wrong decisions had been made, the film series would have just kinda died and gone away forever. And the early 1970s were one of those times. The series was in a state of flux. Connery had left, been replaced, and then come back again, which showed that the series was at a certain stage of soul-searching. The promotional material for Connery's last films proudly proclaimed that Sean Connery is James Bond, and if that's the case, how do you make a James Bond film without Sean Connery? Everyone felt a bit jaded by the experience with George Lazenby, given his lack of acting experience, and then on top of that the advice that he took from his agent to ditch Bond and pursue a career elsewhere, so the producers turned to an established British actor in the form of Roger Moore, obviously a safer bet than going with a complete unknown again, and Moore's affable nature and charm suited the direction the filmmakers were going, retaining the same director and screenwriter as Diamonds Are Forever and continuing down a more comedic and light-hearted route. The result of that was Live and Let Die, a film that's often touted by wider audiences as being something of a favourite of the series, but is that reputation well earned, and is it really as good as everyone remembers it to be? Well, that's what we're going to be taking a look at today as we look at Roger Moore's debut Bond film, Live and Let Die. The film opens with a gun barrel sequence, but a notable change from the previous few films up front. For the first time since Goldfinger, the aspect ratio of the widescreen image has changed back to 1.66 to 1. Given that 3 of the 4 Guy Hamilton-directed Bond films are filmed like this, I'm guessing it was his preferred format. Personally, I think it lends more of a TV image quality to the film and is much less classy than what I would call the proper widescreen aspect ratios that we see in the likes of Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, but minor quibble aside, the film proceeds to have its pre-title sequence without James Bond present at all, as we see several blokes around the world subjected to assassination in a variety of creative ways. Curiously, in one of these segments we have a very quick shot of the main villain and girl of the film, even though they haven't been introduced as such yet. It's a curious inclusion, and I suppose it serves the purpose of identifying these characters as important figures. I mean, they're at the United Nations, they're on a global stage, but if you don't know these actors, we certainly don't know the characters at this point in the film, so you might actually miss that moment on the first watch. Even without Bond present, this sequence is a great hook into the movie and begs an awful lot of questions up front. Who are these people? Who's killing them? Why are they being killed? Could they not have filmed a more convincing snakebite? But we don't get answers just yet because it's right into a great title sequence featuring one of the most iconic songs of the series. The title sequence itself is a really strong one with great colours and beautiful models present, even if this one particular bit of a woman waving manically to the sky in front of a fibre optic light is a bit bizarre. Who's she even waving to? After the title sequence, the movie proper opens on the stunningly beautiful face of Madeline Smith, who is an absolute delight in real life, by the way, but more importantly, we are introduced to our new Bond for the very first time, though nothing about the camera work, editing, or direction would have you believe it. I mean, there's no fanfare, no money shots, we just kinda...
Good morning, 007. Good morning.
Carry on with things, and I assume that this was in reaction to the really grand and stylistic intro that Lazenby received in Majesty's. That entire opening sequence is a showcase for the new actor. He's mysteriously kept in shadows. There's a big reveal moment where he utters the classic Bond James Bond line. He kicks some ass, saves a beautiful woman, and gets a gag in. He hits so many of the classic Bond beats in such a short space of time. Here, Roger gets up and opens the door to M, and then we have some shenanigans where he has to hide his conquest from his boss. It's going to be a long time until we see Bond do anything that's especially like, action movie level, cool, and that's quite brave, and I think it's perhaps something of a bit of an overcorrection from Lazenby. There's really nothing grand to Roger Moore's entrance into the role, and while I think that they will perfect the formula for introducing a new actor into the role in later installments, here to the uninitiated there's actually nothing to suggest that this isn't just, business as usual. Also, this is one of the few times in the series we actually see Bond's home, and it's a bungalow? I'm not really sure what this is, and I love how much we focus on his fancy coffee maker here. His place is very wood-panelled and kind of old-fashioned looking, and then there's just this, like, modern, funky-looking kitchen off to the side. Moneypenny turns up too, and since Q isn't back this time, Moneypenny is the one in charge of equipping Bond with his main gadget for the film, a magnetic watch, which Bond is quick to demonstrate.
In future, Commander, allow me to suggest a perfectly adequate watchmaker just down the street. Good God.
Good job M doesn't have any metal tooth fillings or a pacemaker or anything like that.
In future, Commander, allow me to suggest a perfectly adequate watchmaker just down the street.
The Bond-M relationship here is much the same as it was with Connery, but the Moneypenny dialogue is much less flirty. Moore and Maxwell were really good friends in real life, and I don't know how much of that affected things, but they play here more like siblings, with Moneypenny actually helping Bond keep his conquest hidden. While I think the best Bond-Moneypenny scenes are the ones where the pair are flirting, this tempered-down relationship for the Moore era works well, with the two coming off more like old colleagues sharing an in-joke. Bond immediately puts his magnetic watch to use, prompting Bond and Moore's first great quip of the movie.
Such a delicate touch.
Sheer magnetism, darling.
And then we're off to New York as Bond is sent to investigate the deaths of the three men we saw in the pre-title sequence, all agents and all connected by an investigation into the Prime Minister of a fictional Caribbean island, San Monique, Dr. Kananga. The CIA are already on the investigation, and Bond's ride to their base of operations is hampered by henchman Whisper. So Bond's driver is killed and the car goes out of control, and this does feel like something of a missed opportunity for a cool action sequence. I mean, instead Bond just kind of fumbles around and the car crashes to a stop. Again, it'll be a while before Bond does anything terribly cool, and I guess this isn't so much of a criticism, because like, I am having a good time watching the film, and I guess it speaks to, you know, how much faith the filmmakers had in Roger Moore's performance, that they didn't feel the need to do any kind of, you know, jazz hands around what he was doing. Around here we meet our Felix for the movie, played by David Hedison, and our main villain, Dr. Kananga, played by Yaphet Kotto. I love how Kananga is introduced here. The CIA have him bugged and they're taping him, but he's already ahead of them and he just has a tape on standby that he plays of himself waffling on while his entourage get changed. Bond follows the lead on the car that killed his driver to a voodoo shop called Occult, which is such a great name for a voodoo shop. I love it. I also love how a bell sounds when the door is closed, despite there being no bell visible on the door at all, and eventually Bond recognizes the guy from the car earlier on and follows him out back, distracting the shop staff with a request.
Do you think you could gift wrap it for me, please? Lengthwise, if you don't mind.
I've never really understood why it would take longer to wrap, like, lengthwise than widthwise, but whatever. By the way, every time I'm in a shop and the workers ask me if they can help, I always raise my best eyebrow and respond with,
Just browsing, thank you.
Bond spies Kananga's entourage and pursues in a cab, where we have various shots of various people radioing and giving chase. Bond's cab driver here is one of the best bit part players in the whole series. I love this guy, his lines, his cheeky grin, he's awesome. He takes Bond to Harlem, and through the shots of various folks radioing, it becomes clear, if it hasn't already, that all the villains in this film are black. Okay, admittedly, this guy ends up being a CIA agent, and it's unclear if he's actually talking directly to some of the other characters we see, whether they're also CIA or whether they're working for the villains, but yeah, all of the villains in the movie are black, and I actually think screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz addresses this point best in the making of documentary on the DVD.
It's a Bond movie, so you know Bond is going to win. If the villain is black, you know he's going to lose because the villain is going to lose.
And that's just about it, really. I certainly don't think that the film is trying to make any kind of great racial statement, no more than, like, you know, Dr. No being Chinese was, or a load of villains in You Only Live Twice being Japanese was. The whole subject is kind of so beside the point. I mean, yes, all the villains in the film are black, but not all black people in the film are villains, as we'll come to see soon enough. Personally, I like that Bond is kind of stumbling into a completely different culture to what he's used to, and I love how he has the mickey taken out of him in this bar in Harlem.
Bourbon and water, please.
First move will do.
Tell him, Deke, would you?
Huh?
No ice.
That's extra, man.
The bad guys are of course onto him though, and after a funny turn in a booth, Bond is captured and meets with Bond girl Solitaire, where for the first time Roger Moore delivers the iconic Bond James Bond line, and delivers it so perfectly.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
We also meet Tee-Hee, our main villain's henchman for the film, and his mechanical hook hand, which is a really cool feature, even if it does look a little bit hokey in some shots. So Solitaire is played by Jane Seymour, and this is where we get a proper introduction to the character, having seen glimpses of her throughout the film along with her tarot cards. Now, I don't know much about tarot, but I certainly know that the nature of the cards is up to interpretation, whereas in this film, they take the names of the cards very literally, like Bond is shown up for turning over the Fool card, death, like, actually means death, and, like, Solitaire freaks out when he turns over the Lover's card, and so on. But you know what, for the sake of convenience and brevity, I'm happy to go with that, more so than I'm happy to go with the fact that the cards have 007 printed on the back, which is a mighty fine coincidence, wouldn't you say? We also meet Mr. Big here, played by Yaphet Kotto again, in makeup, who instructs his men to take Bond out and waste him. Just as a sidebar, I love this location where Moore gets into his first little fight of the series. I know this is New York, but this place could be a bombed out 1946 Eastern European city for all I know. It's so despairing, it's such a great spot. Bond is then dispatched to San Monique to investigate Dr. Kananga and the connection between the Doctor and Mr. Big, and we get one of the very best smash cuts of the entire series.
The legendary Baron Samedi, folks. But for our purposes, just a performer in a little musical extravaganza we've cooked up for you wonderful people.
This is hotel entertainment? I would love to read the TripAdvisor reviews for this place. I mean, normally when I go on holiday, the hotel entertainment is some, like, drunk old bloke fumbling his way through Beyond the Sea. I mean, this has raised the bar for me. Next time I go on holiday, I'm expecting voodoo dancing priests and fire breathing and whatever. What is this guy doing? So Bond checks in and does that classic Bond thing of scanning his room for wires, and the expression on Bond's face when he finds them is just great. He's so pleased with himself, and someone at the hotel is obviously onto him, because as he starts to bathe and shave, a panel opens and a snake is lowered into his bathroom. This freaked me the hell out when I was a kid, and I was not complaining when Bond fried the thing. I'm not quite sure if it was this or Hitchcock's Psycho, but one of these things meant that I don't take baths anymore. After that little exploit, Bond meets with another CIA contact in the form of Rosie Carver, played by Gloria Hendry. The character is introduced as what's the word I'm looking for? Bit of a ditz, right up front. I mean, if she's freaked out like this by a dead snake, I don't know how she got through the CIA training, or indeed why she's here on this mission, unless Felix was just, like, really irritated by her hanging around the office, and he was like, oh god, finally, I have an excuse to get rid of her. She's also really freaked out by a small hat left on Bond's bed, and I'm not quite sure who planted that particular artifact. But anyway, the next morning, breakfast is served along with a tarot card, which prompts Bond to go to find out what it means. This comes up later in the movie, and I have a question about it, but we'll get to that soon. Bond and Rosie head to the boating docks, and by the way, I love this sign that's up in the location. Dr. Kananga reminds, the tourist is our friend, his welfare is our concern. I don't know what that's based on, but all it's missing is a smiling snapshot of the good doctor to go along with it. Bond finds the least keen boat driver there is, who is later revealed to be Quarrel Jr., the son of Quarrel from Dr. No. This is, of course, the series writing around the fact that it is adapting the books out of order, and as Dr. No was quite a faithful adaptation of that book, Quarrel was already killed off, despite him already appearing in Live and Let Die, which comes before the book of Dr. No. So in this instance, hey, what do you know? Quarrel has a son. Rosie continues to prove herself relatively inept, but to be fair to her, she's kind of set up to make the blunder here. Like, why didn't Bond or Quarrel just say, oh, by the way, we're mates who go way back, instead of, like, yeah, running the risk of her accidentally killing him? I also love how patronizing Bond is of her here.
I know a place where we could rustle up a car.
Ah, beautiful, brave, and now resourceful. Rosie, you seem to be staging a remarkable comeback.
Great, if booking a car is all it takes to be a competent CIA agent, then so long folks, I'm off to Langley. After some persuading from Bond, the pair take a break to picnic and make out before Bond reveals that the card he received at breakfast was signifying that Rosie wasn't to be trusted, and I love how he waits until after they've had sex before he reveals this, but whatever. I do actually feel a bit sorry for Rosie here. She's going to die by way of scarecrow bullet, but really up to this point she hasn't done anything especially villainous. She could very well have killed Bond and Quarrel earlier on, but she didn't, and the way the actress plays it, you just get the sense that she's in a genuinely hard place here. It's not developed any further, and that's probably for the best, but on a separate point, if they want Bond dead, why not just shoot him with the Scarecrow too, or is this just one of those single bullet capacity Scarecrows? Solitaire gets a bollocking from Kananga as she failed in her prediction earlier on that Bond would be the one to die today. I particularly enjoy Kananga's "can you believe this shit?" exasperated turn to teehee here, but the scene also serves to give the girl some backstory. It is stated that Kananga knew her mother, and presumably she served the same function to him as Solitaire did. Now, he says that her mother lost her powers and implies that he was the one who took them away, presumably by having sex with her, and that he'll do the same to Solitaire when he sees fit. Bond hang glides onto the island and gets into Kananga's palace, where he meets with Solitaire again and cons her into sleeping with him, and Roger's Bond is just a little bit too seedy here for my liking.
The cards say we will be lovers.
Particularly this bit, like just after Solitaire has seen the lover's card and she's thrown it down on the table, and it's a really quick shot, but he's like looking at her face and then his eyes drop down and it's like he's thinking like, come on love, get it off, let's get on with it. By Roger's third film, they perfect sort of the ability to write his scenes with women, but for these first two instances, they just feel like they're just writing Connery's Bond still, and Connery, you know, God knows what kind of X-Factor ability he had to do these kinds of scenes and not come across looking like some kind of seedy asshole, but God, Roger is written and directed to do things that just he looks uncomfortable doing, I feel uncomfortable watching, and him in bed with Solitaire is just really, awkward. But I do enjoy his completely ambivalent reactions to Solitaire's ramblings about losing her powers.
The High Priestess is wife to the prince no longer of this world.
What the fuck? Okay, get over it, love. It's only your virginity. Anyway, Bond convinces Solitaire to take him through Kananga's island to investigate what the heck is going on. Some wonderful scenery and locations are present here as the pair make their hike through, and Baron Samedi pops up for a great appearance too. The journey leads the pair to poppy fields, where it becomes clear that Dr. Kananga is in the Class A drug trade. Samedi tips off Kananga's men, who attempt to apprehend the pair, prompting the first big action sequence of the film, and one of the best, as Bond commandeers a friggin' double-decker bus. This is such a great sequence, and while a stunt driver was used for Bond, of course, in most of these scenes, that's actually Jane Seymour hanging on for dear life at the back of this thing. There's some fun stunts, which of course culminate in the top deck of the bus being ripped right off. The pair make it back to Quarrel Jr., and the trio head off in the boat. Tiny sidebar here, there's a shot that I just love, and it's Bond looking off into the distance as they sail away, and the water just looks so pretty, but you can actually see some shark fins in the water behind the boat. Nothing is really made of the moment, and I'm pretty sure that its inclusion was just because, like, you know what, it's a pretty shot. But I just love that with the sharks coming up, I mean, it's like the coast is clear, but there's always danger following you, Mr. Bond. I like the symbolism of the moment. Anyway, that's my film school thesis out of the way. It's off to New Orleans now, where my favourite cab driver reappears and takes Bond and Solitaire to a nearby airfield where they plan on dropping James out of the plane. And something happens here with Solitaire, and it's very confusing, and I'm not quite sure why she does this.
Today is your lucky day, Jim. You're going skydiving.
There's a hell of a view of the lake from 10,000 feet.
My only regret is I won't be there to see it.
So this, of course, implies that Solitaire was somehow in on this whole plan, which makes absolutely no sense. I mean, why wait until now to launch an attack? Why not have her sabotage something much sooner? I mean, and why put her in danger by having the helicopter fire at her back on Kananga's island? She seems genuinely frightened of Kananga and wanting to get away from him earlier on, so was that just not true? Was she not the one who sent Bond the tarot card warning him about Rosie earlier on? And if it wasn't her, then who the hell did send him that card at breakfast? Because if it was Solitaire, surely she would be wanting him to come and help her escape, but she actually acts kind of pissed off earlier on when he shows up at Kananga's palace. It's very confusing, and I guess it all just comes down to the fact that there were multiple drafts of the screenplay, and Solitaire's role in the book is much more like begging Bond for help, and I'm sure that in previous drafts of the script that will have been adapted more faithfully, but through revisions it kind of just got a bit lost and muddled. I suppose it could be interpreted that she's improvising here, and she's like, okay, this doesn't look good for us, I need to act like I was in on this whole thing. Oh yeah, he kidnapped me, that's what happened. But the way Kananga's other henchmen don't react to her outburst implies that they knew that she knew what was going to happen, and then if she is just supposed to be improvising, then, you know, like a shot or something of her to signpost that information would have been really useful. But really the script just kind of wants to get her out of the way so that we can have Bond pair up with a different Bond girl for the next chase of the movie.
Good morning, you're...
Mrs. Bell, you're not my instructor. Where's Mr. Bleeker?
Indisposed. I'll be giving the lesson.
So Mrs. Bell is amazing, and I love her presence here. She brings a good amount of comedy to proceedings and livens up what could have been just like yet another vehicle chase so soon after we already had one. And I also love this henchman who can't stop his car because he can't find the brakes.
I can't find a brake!
Like, aren't they in the same place they are on every car? It's also a bit lacking how Bond doesn't really disable all the henchmen. I mean, in some cases he just drives past them and they have to dodge, but they're not knocked out or anything, but nor do they continue pursuing. It's just like, oh, well, he sure showed us. Felix having to handle Mrs. Bell's irate actual instructor in the next scene is great, and I like that we actually have Bond and Felix together for a little while here. Roger Moore and David Hedison were good friends in real life, and it's a shame that they didn't have more films together. I think they make for a really great pair, and with great chemistry. Anyway, they head to another location from the pre-titles to investigate as the funeral procession from earlier on presumably takes another from the good guy's side. The editing here is a little confusing. I'm not quite sure what the smile from this guy is supposed to mean, but then after he does that, the music starts up and the party begins as it did when the guy died in the pre-title sequence. So yeah, there's then a very quick performance of the film's title song on a stage, which is pretty neat when Bond is once again apprehended by the villains, but this time it's by Mr. Big, who promptly reveals himself to be Dr. Kananga.
Quite revealing.
Now, I really can't remember watching a film where I didn't know that Kananga and Mr. Big were the same person. I must have had an experience watching this for the first time where I didn't know, but I can't remember that. And I'm really curious to know if anyone, like, remembers having a moment of surprise, like, if that was still possible, because for me, Kananga and Mr. Big have always just been the same person. We get his whole evil villainous scheme here too. Kananga plans to distribute a whole load of heroin for free around the country, putting all other dealers out of business, and then, once that's done, is going to start charging for his product, as he'll have a whole monopoly on the drug trade. I really enjoy how Koto's performance escalates here. Up until this point, he has been very much a subdued, cool, calm villain, and while he'll go much bigger later on, here we just get little hints as his madness starts seeping through the cracks. It's such a great performance that he gives. I really love this guy. So, Bond is knocked out and taken away after Solitaire has rumbled, and it's revealed that she has indeed lost her powers. Kananga is actually genuinely angry about this. He seems even personally hurt by it. He of course lashes out in a really violent way, but for a split second he just kinda looks more disappointed than angry. Bond is whisked away to a crocodile farm, where after some fun dialogue with Teehee, we learn how the henchman actually had his arm bitten off by one of these very crocs. Bond is left on an island and completely alone in a classic Bond villain tradition. I love how Bond's gadget actually fails him here. He tries to use the magnet on his watch to attract a nearby boat, but it doesn't work, which is a nice bit of expectation subversion. This whole bit with Bond and the Crocs is so great. Brilliant shots of the beasts, a creepy as heck sound design, and how Bond escapes is just so cartoony but brilliant. I love it, and the various attempts at performing this stunt that they show in the making of are just incredible. The guy who actually owned the farm in real life ran over the backs of these things for real. It's insane, but awesome. Bond sets fire to the whole laboratory setup the villains have here before making a getaway on a speedboat and prompting the biggest and longest action sequence in the whole film. From a driving and stunt perspective, the whole thing is so wonderful. The boats and drivers perform some really amazing feats. The scenery is great, and there are some nice gags with, interrupted weddings and the like. It's a whole lot of fun. But it is quite long, and James Bond does kind of disappear from from the film for around about 15 minutes with hardly any dialogue or quips to speak of, and so you need a character to fill that time, and the character that we get to fill that time is one of my absolute favourite things about this film.
You picked the wrong parish to haul ass through, boy. Nobody cuts and runs on Sheriff J.W. Pepper. And it's him speaking, by the by.
Yes, so I am an unapologetic admirer and fan of Sheriff J.W. Pepper. He is hilarious, and you can complain all you want about how it's so inappropriate for such a character to have such a presence in a Bond film, but I don't care. I think he's fantastic and a vast improvement on the very bland sheriff we had chasing Bond around in Diamonds Are Forever. But Pepper is such a big character and such a cartoony presence that Bond can't help but disappear from the film partly as a result. There are so many comedy bits surrounding Pepper, and some aren't even related to the chase at all, my favourite being the radio call he gets about going and shooting some local woman's dog which has gone mad or something. It's so strange.
As soon as you nail that offending vehicle, Miss Pearson just called. Seems the dog's foaming all at the mouth. She's got him locked up in her shed, wondering if you'd like to come over and shoot it for her.
It's just quote after quote of brilliance. I love Clifton James in this part, and he looks like he's having so much fun, and some of his lines about, like, swamps full of black Russians and boats moving like buttered pigs. I mean, I think the dialogue is really great, and I don't know if I'm terribly proud to say that I love all this stuff, but I really do. I love this character so much. The whole thing comes to a suitably explosive finale, and then it's up to Felix to inform Bond that Kananga has headed back to San Monique, and Bond decides to follow him and plans to blow up the poppy fields and save Solitaire, who he still cares about for some reason, despite her weird act of betrayal earlier on. Bond heads into the island with Quarrel Jr., and Felix is left behind, presumably wary of involving himself in the story in a large capacity, lest it end with him losing a limb or two, like in the book. Quarrel Jr. has the important job of actually planting the bombs, where Bond goes to look for Solitaire and finds her tied to a post, and I really like Moore's facial acting here as he's weighing up the options of, like, yeah, I could just run in all guns blazing, but there are a lot of people and snakes about. Is there any way I can get her alone, I wonder? Nope, okay, this is it then, I need to have the balls. There's a strange edit here where we see Bond preparing to shoot, and then the music drops, and we see the guy with the snake running away from Solitaire, and it's like, did he kill her or not? It's a while until we actually get a shot of Solitaire. We quickly find out that he didn't, but I think it's just an interesting editing choice to kind of leave that suspense lingering for a few shots. The fields are blown up and Bond saves Solitaire and has a very disappointing showdown with Baron Samedi. Given actor Geoffrey Holder's commanding screen presence and athleticism, I would have loved a bigger fight between these two, but alas, into the snake coffin Samedi goes. Bond escapes down into Kananga's underground lair, and I just love these caves he and Solitaire wander through before coming to Kananga's actual base, which I also love. It's just such a nice, nifty little space, complete with monorail. When we meet Kananga, he has a glass of something in his hand, and presumably he's been drinking a lot as he's positively jovial in these scenes.
Ingenious!
As I mentioned earlier, though, I like this escalation in his performance, and I like that now we see him completely off the hook deranged. So deranged that he is going to feed Bond and Solitaire to his sharks. I love how when Kananga starts cutting Bond's arm, Moore doesn't even flinch, but when he actually says his next line, he is like holding back the pain and conveys it so well in his delivery. It's like, damn, this is really hurting, but I've got 90 seconds without a quip, I can't contain it anymore.
So we could try something in an even simpler vein.
In a really out-of-character moment for the series, we have a Deus Ex gadget here as Bond's watch magically turns into a buzzsaw. The series is usually very good at, like, you know, Act 1 setup, here's your thing, Bond, press this and it does this, and for it not to do that here is just kind of a bit of lazy writing, really, but it's a very small quibble about a climax that I'm really actually very into. It's very small scale, probably the most small scale we've had in a while. There are no armies on both sides, no big assault on a base, just Bond fighting the main villain and his obese henchmen. And yet this isn't a slight against the film. It's a great ending, and the fight with Kananga is really good, with the villain performing some cool, strange moves, but ultimately he falls victim to Bond's shark repellent bullet thing and inflates and explodes. time kind of like explaining this death to people like outside of the series, like we were just talking about like Bond villains, that right? Okay, so this guy swallows a bullet intended for sharks and then inflates and explodes, and I don't even really know, like, is this kind of thing even a real life, like, the shark repellent device? I mean, I've never heard of sharks exploding outside of Jaws movies. So now that the danger is over and the villain is dead, you'd think this would be a good moment for Bond to be all like, so about that card I received at breakfast, was that you? Or, so when you hit me with your bag as I was being led to my death, what was that all about? We're going to just ignore those little plot holes though and move on to the film's coda. Much like all the Guy Hamilton directed films in the series, this ends with a villain that you may or may not have forgotten about coming back to have one last pop at Bond even though the main villain's scheme has been foiled. In this case, Felix sends Bond and Solitaire on their train journey and Teehee appears out of a mailbag for a final great fight with Moore. Given how interesting Solitaire has been throughout the film, you'd be forgiven for thinking that she was the one who took the trip to the post office with Teehee in a massive box to get him here, but at this point she's the damsel in distress who has just been rescued and she's locked away while Bond and Teehee duke it out, and Bond uses the villain's own special feature against him before hopping back into bed with Solitaire and the film ends. But not before Baron Samedi cackles in our faces as he rides along the front of the train in a fantastic ending, and Samedi just has such a phenomenal laugh. It's a great way to end the film. But something I haven't really touched on yet about this film is that, does this confirm that voodoo and witchcraft are like actual things in the Bond universe? It can't be denied that Solitaire makes correct predictions before she sleeps with Bond and incorrect ones afterwards, but this could be explained away as a psychological thing rather than her actually having actual superpowers. Samedi on the front of the train at the end, on the other hand, I mean, if we're to believe that this is real after we saw him die earlier on with the snakes, then yeah, he's a magic demon and Bond is going to be haunted for the rest of his life. However, I don't think we're to take this as any kind of canon. It's just a fun, stylistic way to end the film, and that's it. So yeah, that's the end of the film, and it's a cracking Bond adventure, and one that is very fondly remembered amongst the general populace, I think. Live and Let Die is one of those Bond films that wider, more casual audiences know of well, along with the likes of Goldfinger, GoldenEye, and Casino Royale, I'd say. It helps that the movie has a kick-ass theme song, including the title, but beyond that, this film has just really connected with audiences over the years, and it's easy to see why. It's one of Moore's very best films, and a really fun time. Moore's performance as Bond will get better as time goes on, but there's no doubt about it. For a debut, he's really solid. He brings a lot of his hallmarks to the table in terms of wit and effortless gentlemanliness. Some of the scenes he has with women are a little icky to watch because he just can't play those kind of harder scenes, no pun intended, as good as Connery could, and in later films they figure out how to write him properly in those types of scenes. But it's a small thing, overall he's great. The villains are some of the best in the series in terms of an ensemble. Yaphet Kotto is one of those actors who is just fantastic in everything he's in, whether it's Bond, Alien, or A Nightmare on Elm Street. He always brings gravitas and an excellent performance to the table. Love him, love Dr. Kananga, brilliant villain. There are a lot of hench people in this one, but all bring something quite unique. Teehee is probably the most memorable of them, or at least he is for me, with the hook hand, and he's so tall and that great red suit he wears. Whisper is also a great presence throughout the film, and seemingly manages to survive the events of the film. And you know, even henchmen who aren't even really named, like the guy who follows Bond on the speedboat, is great, and I've already said how much I love the cab driver from those short scenes. Baron Samedi has taken on a life of his own, weirdly enough, and it's strange because he feels like a bit of a separate entity from Kananga and his scheming, but that performance is just so much fun and larger than life, and Geoffrey Holder is such a great presence, and the film is all the more stronger for having a figure like him in it. Solitaire as a character is inconsistent at best. I feel like as the different drafts were being written and rewritten, her character was forgotten about, and there are plenty of loose ends. I mean, who sent Bond that tarot card? Why was she apparently pleased to see Bond captured again? Why do the pair never talk about any of these things when they meet up again? It's weird, but Seymour does a great job in the part despite the holes in the script. She's beautiful and you believe her in the part. She's a great actress. Even though she's at the very start of her career here, I really like in some of the behind the scenes stuff, Jane Seymour talks about how, you know, Roger Moore would sort of lightly make fun of how seriously she was taking the role. The music is the first time in the series that someone other than John Barry or Monty Norman has been principally involved, and here it's George Martin, and I really love this score. It's so different from what we've experienced previously in the series, but I think a different sound really helps when it comes to establishing a new Bond with his own identity. The action sequences in the film are really great, even if they are primarily vehicle-based for the most part. It'll be a while before we see Moore's Bond really get involved in a large-scale battle, but for the film we're in, the action works perfectly. Overall, Live and Let Die is one of the best remembered and well-liked Bond films, and it's easy to see why. It's such an easy watch, filled to the brim with great talent and sequences. I think it's a good one to watch if you're a Bond newbie or looking to introduce a newbie to the Moore era. So with this one, they proved it, right? Bond is bigger than one man. Sean Connery is James Bond? Well, Roger Moore is James Bond. He was well received at the time, as was the film itself. But if anyone thought it was going to be plain sailing from here on, they were very wrong, which is what we'll be looking at in detail when we come to the next film in the series, The Man with the Golden Gun.